I'm with Kirsten Dickins, the Executive Director of Alzheimer's Association Arkansas Chapter. And I thank you for joining us today. And Kirsten and I started this conversation about, we're starting from the beginning for our viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
So you're a child who is now seeing their parents' changes, and you begin to get uncomfortable with those changes. What do you do? For me, quickly, I saw these dramatic changes, and so I got her enrolled in a longevity doctor program, hospital, and so that they would begin the process of asking the right questions, and they did. And so she was diagnosed at the very beginning with cognitive memory impairment. And I was like, okay. And then her next statement was that that's not normal. And I was like, oh. So it got me concerned. And then we began the discussions on the more disturbing topics of dementia and Alzheimer's. So today we're going to talk, and you're going to educate us about some of the symptoms that people could be looking for and begin that process.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your personal journey with that, Diva. I think memory often changes as we grow older, and it can be really hard to recognize the difference in normal age-related changes and actual dementia. So you recognizing those changes early on and having, the wherewithal to say, hey, I need to bring her to a physician who can address this is really key. And so that's part of what we want to share today, is how we can help people understand what those differences are between normal aging and some signs that may indicate abnormal changes in memory, and really what they can be thinking for, so that if they notice that, they can start logging and taking inventory. And so really, if you want to start with a generalization or an overview, it's really behaviors that disrupt daily life. That's usually your first indication that it could be a symptom of Alzheimer's or other dementia. And you mentioned it as well. It's so important to know that dementia is not normal aging. We do have some types of memory changes which are normal due to age, but Alzheimer's and other diseases that cause dementia, that's really something happening in the brain which is not typical. And if you can intervene earlier, it will be so much better for you as a caregiver, but of course for your loved one, to put some things in place to help along that journey.
And you guys have kind of a list of 10 types. Some of them obviously I recognized immediately, and that was forgetfulness of things that are very normal. Misplacing, it was subtle that she would misplace things or forget where the bowls were.
Yeah, and maybe a key in that is we all misplace things, right? And some of us a little bit more than others, but if you have an inability to retrace your steps to find those things, then that is a key indicator.
Sure. Yeah. So I was looking at, for sure, difficulty in familiar task. She was a whiz at the checkbook. And that's when I really knew. It was like, huh. Because she took,
or like a recipe. If they had, if somebody has a favorite recipe, you love to make oatmeal cookies and it only has 4 steps, and all of a sudden, this task that you've done for years on a weekly basis is not familiar to you anymore, then that would be an indication.
Yeah, and her anxiety, she never suffered from anxiety, and she was beginning to have panic attacks about things, and they were related to forgetting,
right,
or confusion.
So that change in mood, yeah, that's a great example. And sometimes we don't want to add that one to the list, right? We separate behavior changes, but if there's anxiety related to a group gathering or a public outing, or maybe just, not feeling as eager, of course, isolated incidents, we all have, situations where we just don't feel up to something. It's that pattern, as you mentioned. So yeah, that's a great example.
And I had mentioned to you that her sister, her beloved sister, had passed. And at first, I wanted just to assume it was because of grief, and that she was getting confused or had the anxiety or the slight depression, which she'd never struggled with. And then the key factor was we were on a trip and she asked me if her sister was dead. Oh. So she could not remember that. That's when my heart really sank. And I knew that there was more of a significant change. There were already changes, but that was like, wow, that's important.
Yeah, that's a great example, a heartbreaking example, but a very good example of confusion in time or place. Obviously those memories were not catching up or, resonating with where she was at the current time. So yeah, unfortunately that happens. I think it's good to point out too, Theba, that, and I don't know if you experienced this with your mom or your dad, but not everyone is going to experience or exhibit every one of these symptoms. It may be just a few, unfortunately, because it makes it harder for us to support those living with this disease and dealing with it. It affects everyone differently. And so everyone's journey is going to be just a little bit unique. So, don't feel like, well, I have to see all 10 of these signs exhibited for that to mean there may be potential issues with dementia.
It's a daunting subject, isn't it?
It is. It's not easy, and can be a really difficult conversation to either, if you are experiencing it yourself, to bring up with your family. Saying it out loud could make it seem more real than maybe just some things that we're internally identifying or noticing. But it can also be really stressful to think about bringing this up with a loved one, a family member, especially when we're not wanting to create additional anxiety or fear. So, we do have some tools that we can probably share later about how to approach the conversation and, maybe ask some questions, to help have that conversation. But, oftentimes we don't want to skip over that as an important part in the step. Yes, you need to see your healthcare provider, but you probably need to have a conversation first.
Sure. I think that's key. And we need to visit that subject.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even just taking her and switching doctors and her asking, why am I going to a longevity doctor? And then when the test comes out and they start asking questions, the anxiety in you and her anxiety, and then they overperform. and they do really well, and you've been trying to tell the doctor, no, she's right, doesn't do that well, and it's just the pressure is intense.
Sure.
So this is a great start. We just want to tell our Vine viewers that we're going to continue this discussion in more depth in different areas for the next several Thursdays, for months and months, because this is so important to address and understand the best you can. So thank you I'm probably going to see you again because we need to.
Yes, I hope so. Yes, so much more to share. Yeah, no, we appreciate the opportunity, and we just want folks to know that there's no need to be shy in asking more questions. So we're here as a resource. They can reach out to KTHB, the Vine, to you, or to us at the Alzheimer's Association anytime to get more information.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Theba.